And welcome to Truth in Telecoms. Now, this is a part two on the AIT discussion. So we had an excellent discussion last week reviewing the reality of the situation. And now this one is, well, what can we do about AIT? So already had introductions to the three other people on this call. So what I'd like to do is actually start with Kevin. Maybe you can open the discussion.
Sure. Thanks, Alan. So for me, you can kind of break this down into what's the responsibility of everyone within the ecosystem from a kind of cooperation perspective. You know, what do we think the responsibilities are? What do we think is simply not achievable? And then what can be done to at least make some progress towards demonstrating that we have a significantly more compliant industry than perhaps the rumor mill might have you believe. And then in terms of technical solutions, there's so much that can be done. So from my side of things, the first thing I would say is that whilst no one is going to be the ethical barometer for this industry, I don't think anyone can be. What I would like to see is when we have exhibitors at events in this industry next to mobile network operators, and they blatantly admit that they can generate traffic for other participants within that event, for example.
Yes,
I think everyone has a responsibility. That's the event organizers, and we know who they are. The major events, you know, the Wholesale World Congress and the GSMA events, the MEF events, the capacity events. We could go around 5 or 6 of the kind of membership organizations, and just have some kind of code of or governance there that says there are certain business natures and business models we simply won't accept at this event. And that would be a great start. What do we think about
that? Daniel? I mean, I'd add to that in that, you know, you're talking about responsibilities. I'd change that a little bit to accountability. And the difference with accountability is that there's a form of it goes beyond code of conduct. There's going to be fines, there's going to be some repercussions if they're caught doing it. It might mean they have to sign up to an independent audit. And you know, when we think about the industry at the moment, there is a conflict of interest. It's very, very hard to get anyone in the industry to step forward and admit that doing something wrong or throwing mud at someone else they're doing wrong. There's a conflict of interest that everyone's clipping the ticket. Even if you're not directly doing AIT, that traffic is passing through you, you're clipping the ticket, making some revenue from it. So in my view, companies have to be accountable, meaning there's repercussions for something that's wrong that was preventable. And second of all, how's that accountability sort of process? There has to be an independent body. I think there has to be someone outside of the industry. That might be something like an extension of ISO 27001. It could be an extension of something GDPR. It could be part of in Europe, we've got the EECC, the European Electronic Communication Code. That there's a whole host of interested third parties that have nothing to gain from how the industry operates at the moment. So yeah, I think that independent body and accountability are sort of two key things that could be established.
In response to that, Daniel, I agree wholeheartedly. I just don't think that's realistic. The reason I don't think it's realistic is because the membership groups that have tried to address this with good intent, with 28 people around a table in Barcelona, for example, organized by the MEF, that type of event generally arrives at the same conclusion. That group of really, really skilled, experienced, knowledgeable people who represent largely all of the key stakeholders within the industry, and the credible ones, I mean, as well. The conclusion will always be you either have to create a cost base in doing that, and who pays for that cost base. And secondly, you also have to demonstrate absolute independence and none of the issues that you refer to there in terms of the conflict of interests. And there isn't anyone who's willing and able to do that. Now, I think I like the concept of actually having some kind of penalty system. But again, it just doesn't, to me, it doesn't seem realistic. And as long as there are leaks, holes, inadequacies in the network infrastructure of the communications network, there is always going to be grey areas, dark holes where people will disappear down, whether they do that knowingly or whether or not they indirectly, as I said on the first edition of this particular discussion. As long as that exists, it's I think it's almost, it's a utopian vision. I just don't see us getting there. But we have to move towards it, and we have to break one or two of the false ceilings that exist simply because people are not willing to add a level of, I guess, honesty, and start to move towards demonstrating progress rather than just reverting to type because there isn't a solution. So I'm not giving anyone a solution here, but that's why I start with something as simple as, let's literally say what is acceptable and not acceptable to be at industry events. If you're a CPaaS player, then this is what we do. This is our portfolio. This is our anti-fraud products. We'll come on to this in a moment, but everyone has an anti-fraud product or an anti-fraud play now for whatever reason, whether that's actually just a ruse or whether it's genuinely an intention of their business. But let's collectively and ultimately policed by the people who actually make money from these events, because all of these events, to my knowledge, actually are revenue generating. They have P&L statements at the end of each event, whether it's Wholesale World Congress, Mobile World Congress. They're all membership events where the revenue generated generally outstrips the costs. So if that's the case, then at least everyone should demand, all the members should demand, that we don't have anyone there who is flagrantly law-breaking and associating themselves with on the coattails of very, very credible businesses.
But,
there's also... Sorry, go on, Alan.
But the events are funded by some of the potential lawbreakers. And, the sponsors drive the events. It's as simple as that. It's not the attendees, people paying, for the ticket. It's the sponsors, because that drives the bulk of the revenue and margin. So I'm just, our event, because I do, like what Daniel suggested, and well, just use one of those independent agencies. But I agree with you wholeheartedly that yes, as the end goal, potentially, but I still question whether relying on these event organizations will generate any credibility because of how they've behaved in the past in basically doing what the sponsors want, not necessarily what the industry needs.
Well, I think you've also got the push versus pull.
Yeah.
If we consider in alignment how revenue enters the industry, it's coming in from the enterprise.
Yeah.
When we've got let's say it's a code of conduct, an industry stated accreditation or kite mark, that's a push effect where a certain quality of standard is being stated, and to be a part of this kite mark or accredited group of SMS suppliers, you've got to adhere to these independent audits or use certain technologies to guarantee that AIT can't be happening at least to sort of 4 nines as a proportion of traffic.
Yeah.
So if that's the push, you've also got a pull mechanism, which is some of the larger corporates, some of the larger enterprises, where they could have their own internal, not industry-wide, is their internal mechanism for monitoring quality, for monitoring AIT, perhaps for encrypting SMS traffic as well.
Yeah.
There could be different standards that they insist on from their suppliers. And by that, if you're a accredited supplier to that organization, you then might get a sort of a gold star that you can show off to the industry, and it essentially it acts as a kite mark. And I think for this industry to navigate through these AIT waters and to come out eventually with a clean bill of, there's probably going to have to be both this push and pull mechanisms where these forces are being applied from both ends.
Gotcha. That's interesting, because it sort of reminds me a little bit of what BT's been doing with its sort of stoplight, or traffic light, I should say. So
BT's an operator, Alan. BT's an operator.
Yeah. But I'm just drawing an analogy that they rate their partners. So if their partner's pumping traffic onto their network, hey, you've got a red mark. And this comes back to what Daniel's was saying. There's financial compensation that happens with that because you're breaking our contract. So there's a code of conduct, there's financial penalties, and it's I think it's public, or at least it's within the group of partners. You see the ratings, because I mean, let's take Google. They're massive SMS generator. I mean, that's one of the reasons they've been pushing for alternative technologies than using SMS. And they could be a very interesting push from as one of the largest generators of SMS. Here's what I'm seeing from my partners.
Absolutely. And I think that the challenge that this industry have, and I'm going to let's specifically talk about the challenge that Google has, is that they cannot independently govern their supply chain to a point where they can guarantee the amount of AIT within this threshold. They, for example, might think that they've got some data and they think that 92% of their traffic is authenticated in some way, but there's still a lot of AIT that comes out through Google. And I wonder if anyone on the planet knows what percentage that is. So until Google can have a level of governance and get a source of truth on the data, you can't ask for accreditation or the standards of service, because governance is at the center of this. And that tool, that mechanism to establish that source of truth, that's really what the industry needs.
Gotcha.
It's interesting. Go on, Johnny.
No, go ahead, Kevin. I just want to add the macroeconomic aspect, but you continue, guys. You guys are really hitting down the right path here.
It's interesting when you talk about Google there, and look, Daniel, I'm sure you've been involved with them, and I've worked over the years with many of the major OTTs and digital natives or big tech companies, and you're right. It is possible via collaboration. So this is about standard good governance, good partnerships based on sound fundamentals, good due diligence, building trust in that relationship, and then identifying major streams of traffic and potential supply points that are letting you down and letting the industry down. Okay. It's actually quite easy to work in partnership between an enterprise and a CPaaS player and an MNO, or an MNO and directly with an enterprise like Google, and address these matters. It takes intent, it takes time, and that generally takes away from generating more revenue and business. And it's about wants and needs. Yeah. So to your point there, Daniel, I absolutely agree with you. But I also come back to the point that we've discussed previously, which is it's always about the weakest point. And the weakest point starts with technology, because we're talking about AIT, but as long as we have issues around misunderstanding what grey traffic is, what acceptable supply chain looks like in the SMS world and A2P messaging world, as long as we have discussions around that, we talk about SS7, we talk about the holes that might exist in terms of signaling firewalls, so on and so forth. There are so many distractions that would suggest that, okay, well, we might make 10% improvement on the AIT, but we might see something else increase, because that's the nature of fraud. Yeah. So whatever happens here, we have to think about pragmatic and realistic solutions. We might need to come at it from a different angle. And the first call ended with us discussing, and I think Daniel raised the point really, really well, is that data privacy and the integrity of consumer data and the networks upon which that sits, and the repositories within which that sits, that is probably a more punitive, or there's potentially more punitive measures that can be applied in that context than there can be in trying to herd cats, because that's what we're talking about here within the subject matter that we're covering at the moment.
But some of the cats are kind of hurting themselves right now. I mean,
Sadly.
look, Mito just did an event with Beth, right? So, Mito, I know them real well from the fights with him and Tintech and years ago, and, spoofing numbers and SS7 stuff and tracking people. And, I think some people are trying to clean themselves up, don't know how. But I think the biggest problem here that we're not talking about, really the elephant in the room, is there's such a sharp drop in revenues. And we talked about it with Robert Viz as far as him thinking that InfoBip Cinch and Twilio would merge, which I don't really see happening. But you have, $100+ billion that's been lost in market caps. Wall Street is completely dead. There's no more funding. Where are these companies going? How are you going to tell people that, this one's doing this over here, I can't do it, but my employees are less important than their employees? It really comes down to economics from my standpoint. If there was going to be a group that came together to try to solve this, I think right now in the USA, because honestly, that's what I focus on and what I know most is on the USA, it's pretty much accepted that Google will have it all within 3 years, 3 to 5. And even all the big CPaaS players, they know this. They won't say it out loud, but it's over here. Internationally, you got way more moving parts, and you've got, third world countries, and you've got kings that run networks, and you've got, payments, and you've got the rising of cost. I mean, Mark Hay put out a brilliant piece the other day about, the cost of SMS. So I look at this as a macro event, but look, if the three of you guys got together and started some kind of board or some type of governance, I think it would be brilliant. I think there's a need for independent. Independent is right here. You, Alan, and Daniel. I'm a business development guy, so my mind is always thinking about business development and where there's a need. I think there'd be a lot of people that would come to the table if there was an independent new org that stood up with the sole purpose of saying, hey, come over here, everybody pull their pants down. Let's try to play this right. And if you're not going to join, and if you want to be a bird, like he doesn't want to join Math, he doesn't want to join this one, then we all point at your small wee-wee at the end of the day. So
who's going to pay for it though, Johnny?
Yeah.
Who's going to pay? Alan Quayle.
Yeah.
Alan Quayle as it's not about who's going to pay for it. You said yourself, you put on these events, there's money to be made, right? We have the biggest audience in the industry by far. Not even close. You go look at a CPaaS, say a podcast or a Meth podcast or one of these podcasts, they got like 40 views, 50 views. We've got thousands and thousands of people that watch our stuff with one eye closed or looking this way or for whatever reason. It's not about who's going to pay for it. It's is there anybody or any group of people that want to put together this type of movement? And I think you could shame people into putting key money up. I think all the companies that everybody's pointing at each other, I think it would be a shaming event to not be part of it. So that's just my business development hat on. By the way, Kevin, I've got my titleist hat on because I know you play golf and I used to play golf.
I suspect that you've just had some support from Titleist to promote their apparel. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want you to know in case you ever want to comment on links, I'll take you to town and
look forward to it.
By the way, I did play golf with Mito for 4 days years ago. He's quite good, actually.
Good
Andrea over there. Huh? Oh, you got one too. There you go. See?
Oh, you guys.
So we call it Titleist AIT. The Titleist AIT group. You got to have a hat.
I've got one thing to challenge what you've just said about creating that independent body. Would love to, but supply and demand. If you don't have the enterprise they're the ones putting money into the system. If enterprises don't want a body like that, then there's no customer who will receive service in the end. And I'm learning this.
Why wouldn't they want it? I challenge you. Why wouldn't they want it if they were aware of it?
Yeah,
aren't they the ones getting defrauded?
Yeah. So the challenge is, and this is a painful experience, when Orgnet was first founded, we're sort of 6.5 years old now, but I would say the first 3 years, I was heavily engaged with many of the biggest apps, particularly the biggest app on the planet, saying, hey, we've got this ability to govern end-to-end supply chain. We can give you SLAs, not just, but we can monitor SLAs against our, against the industry. So you don't need to use us for your SMS traffic. We can audit exactly what's going on. And what we found is a lot of those companies are happy to learn from us, but it's not something they particularly wanted to pay for, which was a painful life lesson. And I think, you've mentioned this in the previous call, that AIT, if we go back 5 or 6 years ago, certainly in the enterprise space, it wasn't commonly known about. It wasn't discussed. So maybe we're a little bit too early to be having those discussions. I think
No,
people
I think
are
it's
waking
like
up to it
it's
now.
like the Diddy situation in the USA and Hollywood. Everybody went to their parties. Everybody knew what was going on. Now that they really find out what's going on, people are running for the hills. I think exposure is everything. I think Elon Musk triggered something.
Yeah.
And I think the industry behind closed doors, from what I'm hearing and the information I get coming in and out. And again, I'm just diving into this international stuff here now for just a couple of weeks because, as my main focus has been really just USA and the markets and the companies and what they did to a certain Air Force major here in my country, which is going to come out soon. So look, you can take a look at everything on why it can't work, or we can just end the conversation there, swirl it around, put it out there that something like this could happen, and who knows? Kevin Graham, everybody loves Kevin Graham. Everybody loves Alan Quayle at the end of the day. If these two guys actually put a hat on and said, you know what, let's corral this, it could be done. So just like I was watching a post this morning, they showed a picture of Google when it first started in a garage, and then they showed a picture of it now. Anything can happen if there's a will, but does it even matter? Because if you listen to Bird, you're going to wake up one day, rub your eyes, and it's all going to be gone. Google's going to take it all. So,
well, there's two things to say to that. So, Johnny, the first thing is, if you put Google and Facebook's traffic together, certainly on an international marketplace, I'm pretty sure it applies to the US as well. More than 50% of A2P messaging is under their control.
Yeah,
or is generated. Yeah, over 50%. If you put the two together, when you analyze the traffic in all of the major international markets, in some it's a fair bit more, some it's around the 50% mark, somewhere in that region. So you need to talk to those two stakeholders. The reality is they're not enterprises. Let's not, and I alluded to this last week, they are not enterprises as we see enterprises providing services to them. They are now telcos in their own right. They have been OTT providers forever and a day. As soon as they were able to start to add value to their subscriber bases, quite rightly, they're the smartest guys in the room. And not only that, their telco teams are now better than the network telco teams. So they benefit from wholesale mechanisms, commercial and technical. They benefit from the influence and the control with their buying power. And ultimately, they need to be around the table if there's ever to be a resolution with this. Their collaboration, at the very least, is required. So we're all we would all be waiting to see how things play out. But I think all of us around the table here understand there's a bigger picture. And I've used this analogy or this challenge a lot in a lot of discussions over the last couple of years. You have the telecommunications industry, and then you have the big tech players. And these guys are getting beaten up by these guys at the moment. Yeah. So are they going to help the telco industry to sort itself out, or are they actually going to make the water just that little bit murkier?
Well, they've taken it over. I mean, back to your statement. So if they're 50% of the AIP traffic, Google just interconnected with Apple for RCS. Depending on how you look at that, I think Google's the smartest guys in the room. I don't think anybody knows what they're really going to do. I know in the USA, just on our specific topic of the campaign registry, you don't need it anymore. Why? You could just go up to the Google hosting cloud or whatever they call it, guest cloud. They bought a company called Jive years ago. You don't need it. So there's so many things you don't. Cineverse now is in shambles. I mean, T-Mobile pulled from them because they weren't spending money on infrastructure. And we did a podcast a while back on Cineverse on how the private equity group that owns them is just sucking every dollar out. So you've got the big players. But, one conversation I had with you, not to get away from this at some point, is where you see the traffic balance between Facebook, Google, and SMS going forward.
So what you mean specifically is the shakeout A2P SMS, A2P RCS, A2P WhatsApp, and A2P other IP messaging channels, and nothing else really matters or registers. So as it stands at the moment, I suspect we're heading towards a world where SMS, rather than carrying 80 or 90% of the A2P transactions as they did a couple of years ago, probably heading towards half of the marketplace. And that and WhatsApp's gained an awful lot in the last year or two. I think everyone knows that. RCS has not yet. There's a lot of talk about RCS. The Guest Cloud has enabled some low-hanging fruit to get working, and that's given everyone confidence. But it's also come with some issues around spam.
Yep.
Think about India and it being shut down for however long it took for them to come up with a solution. So the way I see it, Johnny, I think
India, just so you know, India's blocking everything. They're going after all the OTP players. The government is now taking over. They want to replace the SWIFT system. India is really getting aggressive. I was just looking at this last couple of days ago.
And it's a huge market. But just to finish on this, I can see RCS experiencing the most growth of the major channels. I can see SMS largely being static. I think it's taken a huge hit. It's going to take a little bit more of a hit, but largely will be static. It's not going anywhere. There's still going to be $15 billion worth of SMS.
Except for the USA. The USA, you have 3 operators. It's over. In the USA, CPaaS in the USA, where the biggest dollar amount is, the biggest margins are in the USA, is over. Their main focus is the USA. Rest of the world, I'll leave it up to you to decide, because I think you're right. I think it's going to be segmented. And why do people use Facebook? Why do they use WhatsApp? For making calls, right? That's a whole nother product. So you're making calls and messaging. I don't see how you replace them. I don't see how WhatsApp goes away. Do you?
No, I'm with you. But let's just take it back to the AIT. How long is it going to be before we start to see WhatsApp and RCS being exposed as a channel the fraudsters are super interested in to create the next wave of AIT?
No question about it. I'm sure they're working on it right now, and they're right ahead of us. But then you have 2 groups that have a market cap of $6 to $7 trillion. And with the resources they have, I would think if it's hurting them and hurting their brands, I mean, in the US, you've got both of those companies. Google just got called a monopoly. The EU has gone after Google and quite straight. I think they have some issues from a political standpoint, both Facebook and Google, from a monopoly standpoint. And
absolutely, and from a data integrity and personal data perspective. So
that's a whole other ballgame.
Go back to that. So that could well focus the mind to see the most effective response to AIT and to the fraudulent exposure of these channels. I think it's just a case of time to see how things settle down.
Yeah.
Using these kind of examples in terms of, because we are at this inflection point in the industry now. RCS is upon us. It doesn't mean that the numbers are upon us, the volumes are upon us, but the cultural impact, the awareness across the marketplace is upon us. So how it shakes out, how WhatsApp's growth slows down a little bit potentially, how SMS continues to kind of, keep getting beaten up from every side, but still being this old reliable technology that ultimately will always be there at the very least as an insurance policy, and probably more than that in many markets.
But what Johnny's highlighting is a sort of regional variation that when we look from a North American perspective, because 3 operators, Google, case closed in time. So, and that transition.
3 years. 3 years.
3 to 5 years is the prediction.
With experts.
Yep.
3 years.
So, but then we'll see, I think, a greater diversity in the international market, and where personal data integrity will have a far stronger play. And
Absolutely.
Basically, it's all hidden within Google. We already, with all Google services have gone, Gmail, yes, you have all my data. So, and I've been using RCS on my Android for years now. So yeah, again, they're there. So yeah, I think it's an interesting geographic difference that I think anything that's trying to address the IoT problem maybe needs to look internationally rather than within North America. And just
I have a question for you, Kevin and Daniel. So you've got these firewall companies. You've got, they're all out there. They're putting up big deposits. They're all getting into the space. The aggregators are. I mean, I know Tintec wasn't doing it, and now Tintec has two deals, one in Peru and one in AT&T Mexico, and obviously whether there's Twilio, whatever is funding it. Where do you see? Because I don't see those players really caring here. Like that's going to keep going. I mean, I don't know what you call it: firewall, gateways, deposits, money laundering. Like, what do you call it? Like, what do you call that whole sector?
Yeah. So, well, the sector refers to themselves as SMS monetization, which seems to be a multifaceted definition, depending on where you are in the marketplace. That can work for fraudsters as much as it works for an operator or enterprise. But you still
one more
going
quick thing.
back.
I had a conversation with a really big player in that space and at the senior level, and he said that Google was talking to them and saying, "Well, you're like the best of the worst." I mean, so Google, they're all aware of what's going on. They all know what's going on. They all know what's up, right?
Yeah.
It's all transparent.
I'm just gonna bang on about the same thing now, that the firewall operators, distributors, and so on have the same issues as the SMS industry, in that you can't govern the difference between any two firewall providers. If I'm a big enterprise and I'm going to go out to tender, I'm going to do a big RFP if I'm an MNO, and I'm going to do a big RFP to firewall entities, there's no metric that I can receive from the industry at large to tell me which firewall operator is the best provider for me. It essentially comes down to a relationship, to human trust I might have in an individual, to reputation, and that they can talk as much as they want about technology and how they might be differentiated from someone else, but there's no metric that tells me that one firewall provider is better or worse than another, and that's what we're missing. That complete lack of governance in this sector.
Such a great point, Daniel. Such an important point. There is one metric though, and that's whoever the highest bidder is, because the highest bidder is the one who's going to provide the biggest guaranteed revenue, regardless of who the firewall or what the nature of the firewall is. And I can tell you that the beauty parade on the firewall will say the same things. We'll be able to block, whitelist, blacklist. We'll be able to separate traffic by enterprise or by other vertical marketplaces. We'll be able to develop the AI and machine learning capability within our software to be able to improve your ability to protect your network. In reality, if they get a big check to guarantee their revenue for a year or longer, it really isn't going to make a big difference. And that for me is where the responsibility and accountability for some of these issues lies firmly at the feet of the mobile network operators. And they make decisions based on procurement processes that are flawed. It's as simple as that. I think everyone really understands that. But your point is so well made, Daniel. I mean, I would also say, and I don't, I'm not here to promote any organization, because I would have my own reservations about any organization that is at times funded by advertorials and what have you. And I would say no different about someone like Rocco, but Rocco do the deepest research in this area. And if you're a mobile network operator, you're going to go to try and find a Rocco paper on the leading vendors for firewalls, and you're going to go with that. Now, that's part of the process at the moment, and they do some fantastic work. But whether or not that actually in reality is how it plays out, or if that has any inference or influence on the decision at the end of the day, I doubt it, because it still comes down to the financial return that comes from a combination of a security play and a monetization play. And your points are so well made about monetization can mean so many things to so many different people.
Yeah.
And what you just said there, you're sort of the decision making process that the MNOs go through. It's more of a commercial decision, and it's not. It should be operations and technology based. It should be metrics, things that move the needle.
Yeah, agreed.
Not things that change the balance sheet.
Agreed. And yet we go back to the point that it's based. The problem is that you can make a really technically or really well constructed technical decision, Daniel, as you described there. But if the underlying, if there isn't a signaling firewall in place beneath an SMS firewall, then there's going to be another level of exposure that is going to affect the capability to run an efficient project and an effective project that ticks the boxes that you set out as objectives. So it's always going to be complex because there are other elements within the telecoms tech infrastructure stack that you've got to have secure. And whether that's commercially, technically, whatever it is, that all needs to be locked up to a point of 5 nines or whatever before you can say, yes, this project is going to deliver everything that we want it to. So what do? You generally revert back to money and to the revenue. And it's a real challenge for everyone. But that is where a lot of the issues start and also where a lot of the excuses start.
Yep. So Daniel needs to drop. So I think that summary, Kevin, gets us to, I would say, no further down the path. However, I think we have exposed the parties and some of the decisions that they're making or the offers that they're making at the moment that make this a complex space.
Well, Daniel, I want to say goodbye to Daniel and thank him for his time again. Obviously, we're big fans of his to coming out here. And I still think, Daniel, your time is yet to come. I think the stuff, the exposure, people talking about it, people like Mito doing events with Meth, which is pretty amazing, heading in the right direction. I think we're heading towards a direction, and I think it's important. I think this topic's important, and I think your guys' expertise is priceless. And I think the credibility that you guys bring to other players, they're watching, they're listening, and maybe Alan Quayle wants to be the man who saves AIT. I don't know, because those programmable telecoms.
Maybe I'll
kind of going left on you, Alan.
Off the back of part one of this, I had someone reached out to me as a senior product person from Telefonica, and we're doing a demo to them about encryption and authentication. That removes AIT in our world. So so you've got some listeners out there who are sort of taking notes. So
no. We have a lot of listeners out there. We have 19,000 subscribers. They're all listening, and we got to keep getting you out of here and keep getting Kevin. People are listening to us. People aren't commenting that much. People aren't doing anything, but they're listening, and I'm happy because I've actually had Telefonica pinging me stuff on and looking at me, and I actually connected with a couple of people from Telefonica. So there are some people that are looking for solutions and looking for the truth, and that's what we do here. We're Truth in Telecoms, and
it's encouraging to go on, Daniel.
I've got to go.
Yeah, go. No, I understand.
Just as Daniel disappears, it's really encouraging to hear Daniel say that. And we have seen evidence in the UK with BT that with intention and a commitment of time and resources, that significant improvements can be made, and you can make people accountable, and you can make people improve their own businesses. And it starts with the mobile network operator in that instance. The other thing I want to say is, you say lots of nice things about the independence and the honesty, the ethical code, whatever that might come with any input that I provide. But at times over the last 20 years, I can guarantee you that there will be a number of people sat in this chair pointing the finger firmly at me for using suppliers or putting together business models that have not been, in their eyes, completely compliant. This is just my view of the world. I have no axe to grind. I represent no one other than myself.
But you have a job for a company. You weren't the CEO of that company. Bird made a conscious decision, right, as a CEO of a company to change his business a couple of years ago. He had that ability. He took a $1 billion bet. I reached out to two guys this week on the Bird IPO and the shares and where they're going and CRM and asking questions. I'm talking Wall Street analysts asking questions on this. So you had to use the suppliers that were good to you. You had a bottom line. It's not on you. It's on the industry. You can't go in to a knife fight with a stick, especially if you're working for $1 billion company. You've worked for the biggest companies in the industry. What are you supposed to do? Hey guys, we're just going to lose. We're going to lose. You have to fight at the same playing field. So I don't like that you're pointing back at yourself, because you're out here talking about it and that experience. So I disagree with you there. They can point all they want at you.
Just to put a bow tie on the end of this. So I think what we need to do
I'd like to see you in a bow tie, actually. That'd be pretty cute.
I'm not going to go there. But I think I'm going to produce a summary of this. I think that we have highlighted several issues, because we need to just bound the space in an open way so everybody can agree in terms of there's this problem, there's this problem, there's this problem, so that we can then start focusing. Because I think we agree what BT's done with the traffic light system, with sender ID registration, with having a code of conduct that's enforced with fines. That we refer to event organizers need to have a code of conduct. Well, then there needs to be fines. There has to be.
But they don't have the same teeth. So Alan, this is the thing, and this is where this is great. This is great. It gives us the opportunity, and it's almost like we're sat around the table and we're putting together the strategy for our plan to clean up, or to at least to progress this mission. But BT has teeth.
Yes.
Yeah, they have teeth. Yeah. They own the keys to one of the most valuable networks in the world, in one of the most valuable marketplaces in the world, in one of the most influential markets in the world when it comes to technology, programmable communications, and the proliferation of the services in the enterprise marketplace. You cannot ask a membership group who have no teeth, no capability to hold people accountable to it.
Yes,
it's just not possible. So I hear you.
Bingo, there's your answer. So let's go to talk to BT, since they're the leaders in this, and the Telefonicas, and let's see if we can get something at the operator letter. Or we wasted our time.
Honestly, you want a realistic response? 700 mobile operators, 25, 30 major operator groups control the vast majority of the marketplace. It takes years to get one of those groups on board to drive this forward and to give it the resource that's required, because BT have worked damn hard on this for 2.5 years. And they only really started to see results after a number of false starts. We've all been in this industry long enough to know that it takes time. And what will happen when we do get some movement, if that utopian situation came to fruition, the market would have moved on. Yeah. The shakedown in terms of the market allocation of the channels and the success and the penetration of each of the channels would have changed markedly, and we'd be looking at backwards saying this would have worked 2.5 years ago or 4 years ago or whatever. Exactly. So my take on it is, Johnny, I think we're raising awareness. I think what you guys have done, and I think you accused me of kissing your backside or Alan's backside last week, and I'll do it again. I think what you two have done by providing this platform is given everyone in the industry an opportunity to eavesdrop on a conversation where there's some truth being spoken, and where they can at least nod their head and go, at least someone understands the pain and the difficulty of navigating your way through this very, very complex marketplace. And I genuinely believe that just by raising some of the issues, and as Alan puts out the content from this, hopefully I'm not going to have too many people make me blush, because I don't think that is warranted. What I want people to say is, yeah, I see that, I feel it, and I think that maybe it will get resolved in the future by this. If people have conversations below the line with you, Johnny, with you, Alan, with myself, off the back of this conversation where they don't want to speak openly, that's great as well. We don't expect to be able to resolve all this.
I get them all day, every day.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you're a popular man.
Not really popular. I got a lot of people calling and cursing at me, but that's okay.
Notorious. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, that's me. I'm at the front of the queue usually.
But yeah, I think the key with the carrier issue, time, the GSMA will see it as its property. So there's complexity there. My biggest concern is just Google and Facebook, and they'll have a plan already in place. They'll be very self-focused, but whatever decisions or whatever strategies we come forward, it has to be seen within the context of what those two massive players are doing within the broader messaging. industry.
Totally agree.
But again,
Right.
that's the whole point of having this discussion, so we can get all the dimensions out, and then, hey, you know, if that's as far as we get, okay, but hopefully we can drive.
No, we're going to keep going.
More.
This is just the beginning, Alan,
Yeah.
with Google and Apple and
Exactly.
RCS and Facebook. This is just the beginning of going forward, because still the number one form of communications in the world is messaging.
Yeah,
Full stop.
absolutely.
And again, depending on what happens politically in the U.S., Google could have some problems here in a month.
This is not. We're talking about all the bad stuff. One of these days, we'll talk about the good stuff, because there's an awful lot of good stuff coming down the line, and the next generation of messaging products and services are really going to help the world communicate in a much more kind of its time manner.
Yep.
You know, the kids are going to be able to communicate in a way that is going to make them feel like they've got a service that reflects their day-to-day lives and the way they interact with each other. Yep. That's exciting for everyone. I'm not a big product guy, as you guys know, but I'm super excited about that, and we shouldn't get away from that either.
Exactly. That is safe and secure as well. That's the key.
That's a good note to end on, Alan.
Cool. Excellent.
Absolutely.
Again, thank you so much for this excellent discussion, and I'm sure we'll be following up soon. So take care. Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks, gents.
Hold on.